welcome back to English. Today we're going to continue in Bend 2, and today's a little different because we're not talking about ways to analyze our texts. We're talking about ways to comprehend them, and we're going to look at some strategies to help us understand our texts, especially when they get complicated. So our goal is to practice strategies that help us keep track of multiple storylines. So first, let me explain a bit what I mean by multiple storylines. So often in stories, we will come across internal and external storylines. And we've done this before in our writing units where we drew like the story mountain, and on top was the external plot, and below was the internal, so what's going on inside the character. And an example of this is in one of my favorite movies, Moana. And in that story, we see that the internal storyline is Moana has to find herself and discover who she really is. And the external storyline is that she has to return the heart of the goddess Tefiti. And what we see there is that in order to complete the external storyline, she has to figure out who she is first. So we see there that Moana must complete B to complete A, right? And this is pretty common in the stories we read. Another thing that we come across, and this is where stories can get real complicated, and the example I use is Lord of the Rings. So you may know that, you may not, but this is when, just like Moana, we have internal and external storylines, but we have so many characters, and those characters also have their own storyline. So in Lord of the Rings, for example, there's Frodo and Gandalf here and Legolas. And here there's the big external storyline. So this fellowship has to return, or has to destroy, the ring by throwing it into the fires of Mount Doom. Okay, so they join together to do that, but along the way we learn about each individual character and their own inner conflicts and external conflicts. I've got 3 characters here, but in the story there are many more. In some stories, the authors help us by providing things like character maps or lists of characters, or actual maps of places where the story takes place. But for us, we need to have some strategies we can use to help us understand and keep track of these stories when they get complicated. So one of the things we can do is create a character sheet. Okay, and actually, if you look at the one I have here on the right, these are notes from J.K. Rowling's notebook while she was writing Harry Potter. So on the left, she has different parts of the story, and then it's difficult to read. It says plot and prophecy and a few other things I can't read, but as in this one, time goes from top to bottom, right? So her time is, as you go down, time goes by. But she used something like this to help her keep track of her storylines as a writer. And we'll look again at this in the fantasy unit that follows this reading unit. And on the left, I have another one. It's much simpler, but this is from Lord of the Rings. So we have some characters: Frodo, Gandalf, Legolas, Gollum, and Bilbo Baggins there. And this one moves from left to right. So as the story goes on, I would add what's happening with each character. So like Frodo, in the beginning of the story, we have the hobbits, right? There's Frodo and Bilbo. So I have some stuff written for them. and then Gandalf shows up to celebrate Bilbo's birthday. And while that's happening, we don't know who Legolas is yet. We don't know who Gollum is yet. So I've just got an X there, or I leave it blank. But as the story continues, I would continue to build this chart or this sheet. And what I could do is continue to look at it, and when I get confused, instead of flipping back through the pages and rereading parts and then rereading this and that and spending a lot of time there, I could just look at my sheet. Okay. So another strategy we can use is section summaries. And this is useful in stories that make big jumps of time, place, or point of view. So if you look at my example here from Wonder, in these pages, it tells us whose point of view we will be entering. So when we read part 4, we are kind of seeing through Jack's eyes, and part 1 is August, and part 3 is summer. So if I were reading this, what I would try to do is write a short summary in my notebook. Short summary in my notebook at the end of each section. Okay, so this will help me when I go back and reread. So instead of rereading an entire part and flipping through different pages, I could just look at my summary and know what that part was about, what the main events were, and what happened. Okay, and like I said, this will prevent us from flipping through different pages and rereading entire sections because we've moved around so much and have forgotten some stuff. So just to recap, my suggestions for us today are when we read stories with multiple storylines, we can use something like this character sheet, okay, and follow the characters through time, see when they come in and out of the story. Maybe we could even start drawing lines or doing things to help us, make connections to different characters and different parts of the story. Okay, and then with stories that jump around a bit, we can write some short summaries at the end of each section. So you could prepare for this by looking at the table of contents in the beginning. Maybe you notice something like this in Wonder. Maybe you notice the place changes. Maybe you notice the chapter titles are different people or different places. But these are things we can use to help us understand our books, right? This isn't for an analysis of the story. It's just to help us understand. So give this a try, and I'll see you in a conference.